A nuclear arms race. The United States is considering whether to carry out a nuclear test for the first time in nearly 3 decades. The matter was raised during a meeting of senior national security officials at the White House on May 15th. Officials present at the meeting told the Washington Post that a nuclear explosion by the United States would send a signal to Russia and China. The US has accused both countries of carrying out low-yield tests in secret.
In addition to the anticipated growth in non-strategic nuclear weapons, Russia claims to be developing new warhead designs for strategic systems, such as a new high-yield, earth-penetrating warhead to attack hardened military targets like the U.S., Allied, and Chinese command and control facilities. Russia's development of these new warhead designs and overall stockpile management has been enhanced by its approach to nuclear testing.
Beijing and Moscow have strongly rejected the accusation, saying it's an excuse for the United States to resume nuclear testing. The US has observed a moratorium on nuclear testing since 1992, in line with other nuclear powers. Breaking that ban could doom the 1996 Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, or CTBT.
18 years ago, the event of nuclear weapons changed the course of the world, as well as the war. Since that time, all mankind has been struggling to escape from the darkening prospect of mass destruction.
CTBT is yet to come into force as 8 key states, including the United States, have not ratified the agreement. The US Senate has already voted not to ratify the treaty. The discussion to resume nuclear testing is welcome news for the nuclear weapons industry and the broader US military-industrial complex. But is it in the security interest of the United States?
The U.S. government sees security as its ability to do whatever it wishes to do around the world, to invade other countries, to surround other countries, to secure the interests of Western capitalism. To them, that is the real definition of security and freedom. To the American people, it's a totally different definition. For us, security means economic security here at home, security as we see our biggest problem, climate change approaching. We're not doing anything about it to speak of. And also security from a new arms race, which would be very dangerous for all of us.
International non-proliferation advocates have warned that a nuclear test by the United States would have destabilizing consequences. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, a global civil society coalition working to promote full implementation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, cautioned the United States to think about what this would mean for the people.
I think this is where it really breaks down in this country, that our government, which is controlled by the corporate interests, they have a much different definition of the word security. And obviously, the United States government, Washington, really only thinks about what's in its interests, not in the interests of the American people.
ICAN Executive Director Beatrice Finn said in a statement that a nuclear test would plunge the world back into a new Cold War, erode the global arms control, and trigger a new arms race. But this seems to be what Trump has always had in mind.
Donald Trump today signaled he wants more nukes, shocking nuclear experts by tweeting, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes."
During the 2016 campaign, Trump tweeted that he would embrace a nuclear arms race because the United States would outmatch its adversaries at every pass. What are the consequences of a new nuclear test by the United States?
We know that the testing of nuclear weapons has severe environmental impacts. The preparation for testing nuclear weapons at the Department of Energy laboratories across the country is also problematic, as they produce nuclear devices that they put underground. They have all kinds of history of releases of contaminants into the water, into the air, and workers being contaminated. So there are those environmental consequences. But beyond that, internationally, when the U.S. withdraws from one more treaty, we see increasing instability. We see increasing global chaos as a result, increasing tensions, and again, a new and expensive arms race.
The discussion of resuming nuclear testing comes at a time when arms control is in danger of dying out altogether. The Trump administration has withdrawn from 3 arms control agreements, the latest of which is an announcement that the United States will pull out of the Open Skies Treaty.
Russia didn't adhere to the treaty, so until they adhere, we will pull out. But there's a very good chance we'll make a new agreement or do something to put that agreement back together.
Signed in 1992, the Open Skies Treaty was designed to prevent an armed conflict between Russia and the United States by allowing reconnaissance overflights of each other's territories. The US withdrawal from the 34-country pact has thrown fresh doubts over the fate of a separate arms control treaty with Russia, the 2010 New START agreement.
Today I'd like to speak with you about an issue that is fundamental to America's national security: the need for the Senate to approve the New START treaty this year. This treaty is rooted in a practice that dates back to Ronald Reagan. The idea is simple. As the two nations with over 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, the United States and Russia have a responsibility to work together to reduce our arsenals. And to ensure that our national security is protected, the United States has an interest in tracking Russia's nuclear arsenal through a verification effort that puts U.S. inspectors on the ground. As President Reagan said when he signed a nuclear arms treaty with the Soviet Union in 1987, trust but verify.
The New START, the last major arms control treaty left standing, which places limits on deployed nuclear warheads, is set to expire in February. The Trump administration has signaled it doesn't want to extend the agreement without China being on board.
He said the United States will not do treaties anymore because those treaties will limit the ability of the United States to control and dominate the world on behalf of corporate interests.
Trump has also withdrawn from a 1987 agreement with Russia governing intermediate-range missiles, known as the INF Treaty, accusing Moscow of violating its terms.
The reason is, first of all, you have to add countries, obviously, it's old. But very importantly, one side has not been adhering to it. We have, but one side hasn't. So unless they're going to adhere, we shouldn't be the only one. I hope that we're able to get everybody in a very big and beautiful room and do a new treaty that would be much better.
Trump has also pulled out of a landmark nuclear deal with Iran, officially called the JCPOA, which was signed between Iran and 5 world powers, including the United States, in 2015.
I think it's going to go down as one of the worst deals in the history of this country, maybe of the world. It is a total and complete catastrophe.
Is that the U.S. sees its power slipping away as Russia and China and Iran and many other countries are moving into a position where we'd have a multipolar world, where there would be shared power amongst many great nations. The U.S. rejects all of that.
What does the unilateral cancellation of international treaties reveal about the direction of U.S. foreign policy?
All of these treaties really are about creating stability, about accepting a parity between countries, a rough equivalence of forces, saying that we're not going to try to outpace you. We're not going to try to be so much stronger than you that we create more instability. And so the U.S. really doesn't want that kind of cooperative foreign policy anymore. It wants to reject all of that, wash away all of these treaties, and move towards total dominance.
The United States is the only country to have deployed a nuclear weapon against another nation, as it did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The US carried out more than 1,000 nuclear tests between 1945 and 1992. With an estimated 6,185 nuclear weapons in its arsenal, the United States has agreed to use its nuclear weapons, if necessary, to defend NATO members, as well as Japan, Australia, and South Korea.
You don't want to say take everything off the table because
just
you're
nuclear.
a bad negotiator if you do
Just
that.
nuclear.
Look, nuclear should be off the table. But would there be a time when it could be used? Possibly.
Okay,
President Trump has increased spending on America's nuclear weapons program, saying he wants to make sure the nuclear arsenal is at the top of the pack. The Republican president has said he believes the United States has fallen behind in its weapons capacity.
But without the military, it's possible there's no reason for us to be meeting. Maybe we wouldn't be here. So we're going to have the strongest military we've ever had by far. We're increasing arsenals of virtually every weapon. We're modernizing and creating a brand new nuclear force. And frankly, we have to do it because others are doing it. If they stop, we'll stop. But they're not stopping. So if they're not going to stop, we're going to be so far ahead of everybody else in nuclear like you've never seen before.
Accordingly, the Pentagon has revealed plans to overhaul the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal, pledging to spend $1.7 trillion over the next 3 decades to replace its strategic nuclear triad. The Pentagon's radical approach was made public in its most recent nuclear posture review.
It is an important document that identifies the nuclear policies, strategy, and corresponding capabilities needed to protect us in an increasingly complex threat environment.
The 2018 document was a departure from the previous review that had promised to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in U.S. military strategy. Experts say the U.S. is trying to kill any remaining arms control agreements that might limit its ability to acquire the most terrifying weapons. Why is the United States focusing on nuclear weapons again?
We've seen the U.S. withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal and from the INF Treaty, and now they're talking about pulling out of the Open Skies Treaty and refusing to renegotiate the START Treaty on nuclear weapons. So all of these treaties really are about creating stability, about accepting a parity between countries, a rough equivalence of forces, saying that we're not going to try to outpace you, we're not going to try to be so much stronger than you that we create more instability.
Trump's re-election in danger. As the U.S. economy heads towards a deep recession, President Trump has a new pitch to American voters. Just trust my hunch. Trump, who had hoped a strong economy would secure his re-election, is now telling voters to give him another term, promising an economic recovery after the November election.
Well, we have a lot of priorities. The priority we have is a priority for the country and bringing it back. I use the expression transition to greatness. We're going to have a really good third quarter. It's already happening. You see it. You see what's going on. We're opening up. The states are opening up. But it's a transition to greatness. It's the third quarter, then it's going into the fourth quarter. I think the fourth quarter is going to be really good, but I think that above all, next year you're going to have a tremendous year.
The coronavirus pandemic has gut-punched the economy, placing around 40 million Americans out of work and freezing business activity. Trump has been pressuring state governors to reopen their economies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the lost jobs will automatically return. At the early stages of the outbreak, Trump downplayed the virus while the country lost crucial weeks to take proper measures.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear. And from our shores, it could get worse before it gets better. It could maybe go away. We'll see what happens. Nobody really knows.
The pandemic swept through the country, overwhelming the public health system and killing more than 100,000 people. Why should Americans take Trump at his word when he says the economy will come back after the election?
The problem is not whether we can believe whether he knows the future. That's not the issue. The issue is the fact that there's a total lack of leadership. There's a total lack of a clear voice with guidelines, and that's the reason why you see the chaos across the country right now. You see counties, for instance, that are defying the state governments and doing their own thing, regardless of what state law says. So it's like the wild, wild west out there, which really decreases our chance for a strong recovery. And that's what I would sort of blame Trump for, and I would say that would lead to a real loss of confidence in his ability to lead.
Opinion polls show that Trump and his advisors still have a hard time convincing voters that all will be well next year. According to a survey by the Associated Press, 70% of Americans now describe the state of the economy as poor, versus just 29% who say it's good. Furthermore, a CBS News poll has found that 57% of Americans believe Trump is doing a bad job handling the coronavirus crisis, as opposed to 43% who believe the opposite. Political strategists say this election will turn on facts more than messages. Is Trump's re-election bid in danger, given the twin health and economic crises?
I think the election will turn on is what actually happens, and not on what the messages are or even the facts as we know them now, because a lot we still don't know, and the experts are rather clear about that. Again, I'll sort of return to the fact that the reason why he's doing a bad job, I mean, this is a crisis that everybody may surprise, and I'm not really convinced that too many leaders in his position would have done better in the beginning, but it's the fact that there's a lack of leadership. There's a lack of a clear voice. There's a lack of honesty. There's chaos in terms of everybody disagreeing with each other on public display.
Economists say that the economic snapback the Trump administration is promising is unlikely, given the severity of the recession.
The record shows that deeper and longer recessions can leave behind lasting damage to the productive capacity of the economy. Avoidable household and business insolvencies can weigh on growth for years to come. Long stretches of unemployment can damage or end workers' careers as their skills lose value and professional networks dry up, and leave families in greater debt. The loss of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses across the country would destroy the life's work and family legacy of many businesses and community leaders, and limit the strength of the recovery when it comes.
The Congressional Budget Office says it will take years for the economy to recover. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta forecasts the U.S. economy will be shrinking 42.8% through June. That's negative 42.8%. As for the jobs market, Federal Reserve Chief Jerome Powell has warned the unemployment rate could hit 25%. That sounds drastic. How deep of a hole has the U.S. economy fallen into? How long does it take to crawl out of it?
The economy is in a pretty deep hole right now. But if there's a resurgence and people's confidence, and this is the key here, if people's confidence is not there, I mean, even if we don't close down and we just stay open again, but people see the death numbers going up again, and people's confidence isn't there, and there's another dip, that will be disastrous for the economy. And then I think that it's going to be like another at least great recession and maybe a Great Depression again.
Realizing that his re-election prospects are dim, Trump has increasingly deployed the same dirty tactics he used during the 2016 election. He's ramped up attacks on the integrity of the US elections and is portraying his rivals as corrupt insiders who, given the chance, would run the country to the ground. Just as he did in 2016, he's warning about rigged elections and voter fraud.
When you do all mail-in voting ballots, you're asking for fraud. People steal them out of mailboxes. People print them, and then they sign them, and they give them in. And the people don't even know where they're double counted. People take them away. They force people to vote. When that starts happening, you don't have a fair, you have a rigged system. You have a rigged system.
Back in 2016, Trump had refused to say whether he would accept an election loss.
Do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time.
Since then, Trump has repeatedly joked about staying in office beyond the 2 terms the U.S. Constitution allows. Trump's rhetoric surrounding the integrity of the election has many wondering how he might respond to a defeat in November. Democrats say the president has already set the stage to delegitimize the election if he loses, warning of a constitutional crisis. Trump has frequently urged his supporters to back him up on controversial issues, even if it takes violence to do so.
I've had enough of being told what I can and cannot do. I've had enough of worrying about bills and making money.
Many fear that the president's most ardent supporters will not accept a potential loss in the November election.
Yeah, my concern will be is that if he loses, or even there's a prospect of him losing, those really vocal and not only vocal but active in terms of acting it out to people in the electorate will cause a lot of chaos. Maybe something that we haven't really seen in this democracy before.